Welcome in to another episode of Home Field Advantage. Hope you're all having a great start to your week, wherever you may be listening or watching across our great country or our great land. My name is Will Highland. It is October 24th, 2023. And to be honest, actually it's October 23rd. I just saw that in the top right of my computer. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Um, don't want to jump ahead of ourselves, but I don't have a huge agenda for a Monday morning. Usually I'm like chomping at the bit with a bunch of stuff. Um, quick headlines. I mean, Texas evening the series with Houston last night, forcing game seven. That's amazing. Um, Philly is looking to close it out on Monday tonight, and head to the World Series. So the ALCS and NLCS are wrapping up, and the World Series will probably, I think it's supposed to begin Wednesday or Saturday, Thursday maybe. I don't really remember when game one is supposed to be, but I think a lot of it will be determined by what happens tonight between Philly and Arizona, and if there's a game seven in that series. So that's a big thing going on right now. Elsewhere in the sports world, the NHL is in full swing. Only the Bruins and the Avalanche remain undefeated. I believe Detroit is 5-1 as well. So I think those three teams are the only teams with 5 wins. The Bruins have been playing a lot of late night games on the West Coast, so I haven't been able to watch them as often as I normally would. And despite that, though, it seems like they're winning um, in pretty much the fashion that I would have expected them to. A lot of 3-1, a lot of 4-2 kind of wins. Those are the kind of wins that the Bruins are going to need to rack up this year in order to um, make the playoffs, and then we'll see about how deep they go. But despite all that stuff going on in the sports world, I think there's one thing that's on the mind of a lot of my listeners this morning, and that is the victory by the New England Patriots over the Buffalo Bills. That is probably the number one story for my listeners, for the NFL. Let's talk about the Eagles and the Dolphins in a little bit. Don't worry, and the rest of the scoreboard. But in terms of the Patriots and the fallout from that victory, that's where I'm going to spend the next few minutes, and then we'll wrap up talking about the rest of the league. So first things first, you got to put credit where credit is due. This Pats team has been left for dead. I've practically given up on them, and I'm like the eternal Mac Jones optimist in these parts. It's a very lonely place. But even I was beginning to give up on this Patriots team. I did not think that they were the kind of team that could win the easy games, let alone steal some of the hard ones. That was my thesis at the beginning of the year, was that there'd be a handful of these swing games, and yesterday was one of them, where the Patriots would either win or lose based on a handful of plays. It wasn't going to be like against Dallas or New Orleans where they got blown out. That's what I thought the majority of the Patriots season was going to be, was games like yesterday, games like Vegas, games like Philly and Miami. And to be honest, I've been proven right. I mean, there's the two blowout losses aside. I mean, I know those are huge losses, and they impacted a lot of the conversation happening around this team. But they played 7 games, and 5 of them have been close, right? So what you do in those swing games was going to determine how this season goes. Now, I have their schedule right down in front of me here, and They get Miami next week. And then they have winnable games at home against the Washington Commanders. And then they go to Frankfurt, Germany, and play the Colts. I think those are both winnable games. And then they have their bye week. So even if they go 2-1, I think it's realistic. I don't think the best case scenario would be they win their next 3 going into the bye, and then they're 5-5 at the bye. That would be amazing, but let's be honest, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to get carried away after one win over the Buffalo Bills, which we'll break down the win more in a second. I'm just trying to get to the big picture first, actually. Then you have road against the Giants and then the Chargers at home. And then you're pretty much in December by then, like in the thick of December. So the next 3 games are going to be the big determinant. If they go 2-1 in those games and they're 4-6 heading into their bye, they're not out of it in the AFC. They should not be out of it by then in the AFC if they're 4-6 heading into the bye. If they're 3-7 heading into the bye, they're probably out of it. If they lose these next 3 and they're 2-8 heading into the bye, they're definitely out of it. But then after the bye, you have chances. You play Pittsburgh. You play the Chargers. Both of those teams are ahead of the New England Patriots in the standings. If you can beat them, unlike you were able to do against the Raiders, who are right now ahead of you in the standings, then you set yourself up for possibly a tiebreaker scenario if you are still competing at the end of the year in Week 18. Now, that's a huge question mark, and I don't really think it's possible for them to be in contention during the final week. Their schedule's just too hard, and they go at Giants, home Chargers, at Pittsburgh, home against Kansas City, at Denver, at Buffalo, home against the Jets. I mean, that's a pretty hard schedule to end the year. So, I'm not saying it's likely, but the possibility exists, and you might as well go for it because the AFC isn't that good right now. You have the Chiefs, you have the Dolphins, you have the Jags, and you have the Ravens leading their divisions. Pittsburgh and Cleveland are going to beat each other up in that North. Right now, they're sitting at I believe the 6-7 or the 5-6. I think Buffalo is the 7 right now. Those teams you've already beaten Buffalo. You're going to get them again. It's going to be on the road, and it's going to be on New Year's Eve. That's going to be a hard one. But the possibility exists that the Patriots are still competing at the end of the year if they don't completely F up like they did the last 3 weeks before yesterday. It does exist because the AFC is a hodgepodge of mediocre at the moment beyond those 4 teams. And those 4 teams are playoff locks at this point, I would say, unless things really go bad. So if you're a Patriots fan, you can look at, okay, are they somehow going to end up with a better record than Cincinnati? Unlikely. All right, so there's another playoff spot. Are they going to end up with a better record than Buffalo? Probably not. Even though they beat them yesterday, they're still, I think, 2 games behind. So you have a situation where now you're competing with a final playoff spot. And who are you competing in that final playoff spot with? The Browns, the Steelers, the Raiders, the Chargers. That's your mix right there. The Jets possibly, but again, with the Jets and the Browns, I don't see the train staying on the tracks forever. And the Jets have a super hard schedule in the middle of their season right now. Then they're going to go into an easy schedule. So you get them in the final week, and you've already beaten them once. So for the Patriots, I know they're 2-5, and I know they've looked like dog crap, but winning yesterday does change the calculus a little bit if you want to tank the season, quote unquote. I don't think you should tank the season. I really don't. And I said this in my podcast yesterday, in my quick live video I did. If you are the Patriots, who are you tanking for? Are you tanking for a particular quarterback at the top of the draft? Because, I mean, Caleb Williams, I don't know if you've paid attention to college football. He looks a little shaky, to put it mildly, the past couple weeks against Utah and Notre Dame. Those are two very good teams, and he didn't look that great against them. All right, Drake May. I like Drake May. To me, he's a special talent, but there's guys like Drake May that come out of the draft every other year. So to me, it's not worth tanking a season for Drake May to possibly be good. To me, he's like a better Will Levis. I think he's on par with CJ Stroud. A lot of good upside, and CJ Stroud's had a good start to the year. Houston's, in fact, another team I would put in that mix. But I don't think CJ Stroud's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler, All-Pro candidate, right? I see Drake May more like that guy. And those guys come out of the draft all the time. There's so much talent in college football. Those guys come out of the draft every year. So I don't think that there's a quarterback worth tanking for. Now, if you want to move on from Mac Jones and you want Caleb Williams or Drake May or, Quinn Ewers or any J.J. McCarthy or anybody we've talked about, then you don't really have to draft in the top 15 if you want anybody besides Caleb Williams or Drake May at this moment in time. That obviously changes throughout the year, but whether you're drafting 1, 5, 8, 10, it does not matter. You got Mac Jones at 15. You weren't going to draft number 1. You weren't drafting Trevor Lawrence. He wasn't available to you. So, I mean, you could still take a quarterback high if you want, but I would much rather the Patriots go get that offensive lineman from Notre Dame or something. Seriously, that's what I would prefer they do, and then maybe get a quarterback in the second round. I mean, you got Jimmy Garoppolo in the second round. All right, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about the draft this year if things can continue to not trend in a playoff direction for the Patriots. But in terms of yesterday's game, look, you got to give credit where credit's due. They beat a good Bills team. I don't think the Bills are as elite as they have been in recent seasons, but they're still the best team the Pats have beat in, I would say, at least a full year. I can't remember the last time. I think the Pats in week 12 in 2021 beat the Titans, who were at that time competing for the number 1 seed in the AFC. I'm not sure if the Pats have had a win as impressive as that since. I mean, I really don't. I mean, they beat the Bills in that windy game, a couple of years ago. I think it was the same season. I think it was even the week after that. So that season they had a couple big wins. I think they beat the Chargers on the road. But last year, I think they beat the Jets twice. They beat who did they even beat last year? I think they beat the Steelers on the road. They beat the Browns, possibly. Or did they? I don't even. No, yeah, they beat the Browns. They beat the Browns at home. I can't remember. I really can't. Did they lose to the Browns? No, they beat the Browns on the road. Zappy played, I think. But they didn't really have a lot of big wins. I mean, they beat the Lions. That was a win. I think Zappy played that game. But they just didn't really have a lot of signature wins. I'm telling you what, yesterday, even though the Bills had a lot of procedural penalties, the Bills gave you a turnover early. They missed the kick. I mean, the Bills did a lot of things that result in losing football. But when push came to shove, they executed a comeback and made the Patriots defense look silly. And then things were really trending downward when you had the sequence where Mac Jones didn't get the 2-point conversion on the sneak that he checked into. Then the Bills went down and scored a touchdown doing whatever they wanted to do. And the Patriots, which this was a problem yesterday, they had a hard time tackling on that drive. And then the Pats get the ball back and are executing the 4-minute offense. But then Kendrick Bourne fumbles. And then the Bills score quickly again. And so now you're in a situation where it's 25-22, and Mac Jones is getting the ball with under 2 minutes to go. And I think all of Patriots Nation, respectfully, and I don't blame them for this because this is what recent history tells you, you didn't have a lot of confidence that Mac Jones was going to execute a comeback. That wasn't in the cards, right? That wasn't something that Patriots fans expected. He's only done it once in his career. That was about 2 years ago against Houston, against a rookie quarterback himself. And he had failed in that situation time and time again, including 2 times this year, including, I think, 3 times this year. So all of that said, that's not what happened. Mac had, I think, the signature win of his career, which is a comeback win in the final 2 minutes against a good team that they hadn't beaten a lot. And they had a situation where he executed a game-winning drive after already having 2 drives in the game that resulted in touchdowns that were impressive. Like, they scored 3 offensive touchdowns yesterday. They haven't done that all season. So they scored more points yesterday than they had, I think, all year. So, look, like, you just got to say, like, there's been games like in Dallas where Mac Jones was a huge reason, if not the reason why you lost. Then there's been games like yesterday where I would say he was the reason you won. And for the Zappy truthers and the Caleb Williams tankers and the Cam Newton loyalists who might still be hanging around, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow for your narrative. And I'm not going to overly gloat as a member of the Mac Jones supporter island because I know it's one game and I'm smarter. I hope I'm smarter enough than to think that it's going to signal any massive change. But what I'm telling you is that ability does exist, right? Like we saw it in 2021. We saw it yesterday. That ability does exist. And the number one reason, as I've been harping on for 6 weeks now, the number one reason why that ability existed yesterday is because the offensive line played better. You put Mike Owenu on right tackle, and it was like a completely different offensive line. Also, Dante Scarnecchia was in the building for his Patriots Hall of Fame induction, and that was pretty much a situation that's hard to ignore, where suddenly Dante's in the building and the Patriots offensive line reverts to looking actually good for a change, and allowing Mac Jones to throw. There were throws, the play action game, the inclusion of Pop Douglas in the offensive scheme, Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry getting open, Zeke and Ramondre having yards after the catch or big playability. Those are all factors that led to Mac's success yesterday, but his command of the offense in the second half particularly is what won you the game. Those 2 touchdown drives in the second half, the one to extend the lead and the one to take the lead. It sounds weird when they're put in that order, but that's pretty much what happened. They extended the lead, were up 2 scores, and then had to then come back. Those were the 2 best drives of the season and 2 of the better drives I've seen him execute in his career. So with all of that said, they beat a team in the Bills that they had beaten in a while, and that they need to start beating, and that continues next week with Miami. All right, speaking of Miami, let's revisit their Sunday night game here. I'm going to pull up some of the stats because I did not stay up to watch it. Miami, I mean, they were heading into the game 5-1. They're a super explosive team. They have all kinds of playmakers on every side of the field. But the thing is, they ran into a team that also had that last night, right? A.J. Brown for every Tyreek Hill, a Devonta Smith for your Jalen Waddle, a Jalen Hurts for your Tua Tagovailoa. Very much similar teams. Explosive Alabama quarterbacks, explosive Alabama receivers, fast, athletic, tall, number one receivers in Hill and Brown. They both have good tight ends and good running backs, athletic defenses, fast teams. So Miami ran into a road game against a team that, I mean, is very much like them and couldn't pull off the win. So that was a big result in the NFL yesterday. The Eagles continue to position themselves as the best team in the league alongside San Francisco. San Francisco plays tonight against the Vikings. Prime Kirk Cousins on Monday Night Football. At home, though. I think that will be an interesting game to see. I like San Francisco in the game still, but that's a tough place to play in primetime. It is. It's a tough place to play. Chiefs win over the Chargers, same score as the Eagles beat Dolphins. It was 31-17. Travis Kelce went off in the first half, probably because his girlfriend was there. Broncos beat the Packers 19-17. Green Bay giveth and Green Bay taketh away. There's a lot of Jordan Love hype. I'm going to pull up the numbers, though. Yesterday, Jordan Love, 21 of 31 for 180, 2 touchdowns and interception. I mean, those are Mac Jones kind of numbers. And, the Denver Broncos were able to pull out the win. I say that in jest, of course. Jordan Love hype, I think the train is a little bit falling off the tracks there. They're 2-4 now. A lot of people were high on them early on. That's not materializing as the season progresses. Seahawks beat the Cardinals. That was a little bit of a snooze fest. Steelers take out the Rams in a tightly contested second half. Falcons beat the Buccaneers 16-13. It's a really confusing division. Atlanta's 4-3, Tampa's 3-3. The Saints are hanging around. I believe they had a bye, and it's just actually no. They lost to the Jags on Thursday night. That's what it was. The Saints are 3-4. I mean, that division's all over the place. I don't know what to expect. For a while, it looked like the Buccaneers were going to rebuild faster from Tom Brady than the Pats were, but perhaps that's a story for another day. Ravens, they look good. They take care of the Lions 38-6. Bears take care of the Raiders 30-12. Giants take care of their Commanders in that really tightly contested game 14-7 at the end there. It got really tight, but the Giants were able to hold at the goal line. Similarly, the Browns were able to do the same thing with the Colts. I thought the Colts got absolutely shafted with a few calls there. First of all, there was a holding call that negated a strip sack, essentially, and a fumble recovery by from PJ Walker by the Colts that negated basically a game-sealing win. And then Peoples-Jones drew a DPI in the end zone. And I thought the Colts got completely shafted there. And then that pretty much rounded out the NFL slate. So, look, I mean, the NFL's wide open. I mean, some divisions are all over each other. The AFC East is beating up on each other. The Pats might be the worst team in the conference right now, other than Denver, but I would say both Denver and the Pats won yesterday. I think Cleveland's hanging around. Houston's hanging around. Steelers are hanging around. The Chargers are hanging around. The Jets are hanging around. And the Pats play some of these teams later on in the season. So if they're able to execute, they could find themselves in a position to still compete for the playoffs, but I wouldn't bet the farm on anything at this point. All right, elsewhere in sports, tonight, Phillies with a chance to punch their ticket to the World Series. It would be the second consecutive year that Philadelphia represents the National League in the World Series. It would be, I believe, the fifth time that David Dombrowski has made it to the World Series as an executive. He's already won 3 in 3 different decades with the Red Sox, the Marlins, and the oh wait, no, he would have to win. Yes, he would have to win. He has not won with Philly or Detroit, but he's been with Philly and Detroit. So he's been to 4 World Series in 4 different decades with 4 different teams. He's won 2 already, almost 20 years apart, or over 20 years apart. And so if he's able to continue on and take care of Arizona and then go again and then possibly win, he would cement himself as probably one of the best baseball executives of all time if he hasn't done that already. So there's a lot in baseball history riding on Philadelphia making it, and I think it would be a more exciting World Series to have Philadelphia there. I think Philadelphia is a baseball town. They have a lot to cheer about right now. They've sort of become I'm going to throw up a little bit, like a Boston in that they've got the 76ers competing every year. They have the Phillies and the Eagles competing every year. And unfortunately, the Flyers, because they didn't spend money on Johnny Gaudreau, may forever be in the basement. But that's all I really got to say about that. And that's going to do it for this episode of Home Field Advantage. Hope you all enjoyed the show. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get them, and follow us on social at Homefield Pod. We'll be back on Thursday with another podcast here on the YouTube and on the audio. But until then, my name is Will Highland. You've been listening to Home Field Advantage.